Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-Tahirin. It's a great privilege for me not just to be here, but to have heard just what I heard. A candle of hope in a period of time where you see confusion, pain, suffering. So two things really resonated with me there. The first is the idea of mercy, and the second is the idea of love. Both of which are very powerful in this current time. Light is something that guides. And today, having watched what I just did, I realized that, look, we hear about Imam Hussain, but today truly in Karbala, Yazid died and Hussain won. That was what the message of Hussain is. Death in itself is not a barrier. But through death, Imam Hussain gave life. And this is why today, 1400 years later, you find millions of people who walk towards Imam Hussain. Look, throughout history we find that many tyrants have tried to stop this. But this mission is so grand. In and of itself, I would say, the biggest miracle in Islam is the commemoration of Imam Hussain. Yes, the Quran is a miracle, but not everybody understands it. The biggest living miracle, nevertheless, is this pain that we cultivate in our heart, that our children probably don't even know who their great-grandfather was, but today if you ask a small toddler even who Imam Hussain was, he'll give you an entire biography of who Imam Hussain was. And that is the power of Hussain. That is the power of a message. That's a message that's still alive today. That's a message that's connected from the heart, to the heart, by the heart. It's connected through emotion, and the most powerful thing we have is not actually the intellect. The most powerful thing we have is love. And the highest level of love is when you're brought to tears. And so the entire message of Imam Hussain is a journey of tears. It's a journey of tears from the very beginning. It's a theology of tears, in fact. And you find that some of the great prophets within the Judaic-Christian theologies and within ours and the Dharmic faiths, what you find is it's been a movement of tears. From Adam's tears to Moses' tears, or even before that, Abraham and Noah. Noah itself means a person who cries a lot. Jacob, Joseph, and then you find the Prophet Muhammad. The idea of tears. Tears shifts hearts. And the idea is hearts need to be shifted. And so this is why we say that what Imam Hussain did was inqilab in its sense, a revolution. Revolution goes back to revolve, and inqilab goes back to what? Qalb, the heart. Qalaba, to change the heart. What did Imam Hussain do? If truly you want to talk about revolutions, that's a revolution. The idea of changing the heart. Revolving the heart through revolution. And that's exactly what happened. Hearts changed. 1400 years later, our hearts are still changing. And that's important. The hearts need to be alive today. Imam Hussain revives this nation time and time again. And so look, what am I seeing here? I'm seeing unity in this room. People of different backgrounds, different faiths. But you've come together. Why? Because there's two things which are in common, mercy and love. And that's what's encapsulated in Imam Hussain. That mercy and that love. The overflow, the idea of the overflow of love, mercy, compassion. So it brings us together. And you'll find even enemies sitting in this room at least will be united for the sake of Imam Hussain. It's very interesting that Hussain neutralizes animosity and enmity as well. And that's why within our communities you find that it's Muharram time that people open up their hearts. Removes distances, brings people together. But anyhow, there's 5 themes I want to focus on. And I find that Imam Hussain resonates on these 5 themes. One of them is something that you've been doing across the country. In fact, across the Western world, you're finding more and more. What was Imam Hussain? He wasn't just an imam who prayed and fasted. But the biggest message of Imam Hussain is the social message. The biggest message of Imam Hussain is the human message. Go back to some of our traditions and see. There were multiple Christians in Karbala supporting Imam Hussain. And you find a tradition where 9 ethnic Jews also, on the 9th of Muharram, shifted from one camp to another, They didn't convert, but the idea was humanity was far greater than just conversion. Look, it really resonated with me when he said that my heart filled for Jesus as much as Imam Hussain. That means the heart is living when the heart identifies love and compassion. And that's something that we shouldn't forget. Just because we believe in Imam Hussain doesn't necessarily mean we have a free ticket to an expansive heart. Until we don't apply the teachings of Imam Hussain, it becomes very difficult. Remember, it's very simple to go back into a sense of love. The fact that we believe in Imam Hussain and that's fine. No. Hussain may be a name, but it's the characteristics that we must say. Look, in this diversity, the image of God is here. What is the image of God, to use a biblical term? What is the image of God? For a Muslim, it's not a physical face. God can't be comprised into a body. The image of God are the names and the attributes of God. It's the virtues of God, and those very virtues are found within humanity. If we're the mirror of God, according to our mystics, what does that mean? That means we mirror the virtues, the names, and the attributes of God. What is it in Imam Hussain? In Imam Hussain, you find all of the names and the attributes of God working together. And in this same way, we must also go back to that, to be able to apply the names and the virtues. And as we know as Muslims, the overriding name is the name of mercy. And this is why your Quran begins, Ar-Rahman, in the name of that one who's all-merciful. Not just for Muslims, not just for the Abrahamic faith, but the Quran itself says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O humanity. And it addresses humanity as one. And so this message is something which is perennial from the very beginning of time. And so what do you do when you go to Imam Hussain? When you go there, you give your salam. And how do you do that? You begin by saying, salam on who? The one who's the inheritor of the prophets. And that tells you in and of itself. Hussain isn't restricted just to the final prophet. The message is from Adam, and you begin by saying, taking the name of Adam and working all the way down to the Prophet Muhammad. What does that tell you? That tells you his message is timeless. It's a perennial message. It doesn't just begin 1400 years ago, but it begins with humanity. It moves with humanity, and it shifts from one heart to another heart to another heart. So look, 5 themes. The first theme really is this. You see pluralism within Imam Hussain. And that's something which is important today. Why? Pluralism cannot happen in its absolute form until there's no dialogue taking place. And the biggest problem today is this, that we restrict ourselves to social media, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, the phone. What happens? You're divorced from dialogue. The most powerful thing is when 2 people come together to talk face to face. And that's something which is important. Why? Because in this day and age, if I was sitting as I am today in the United States, you Google Shiism, and the first 15 websites that come is something which is negative. I go to the Middle East today, I Google Christianity. The first 15 websites are going to be negative. If that's my source of information, then we're polarizing one another. The most important thing therefore is this, open your doors to people to come so we can dialogue. Look, most of you are from the subcontinent. In one generation in the United States, you're having problems with your generations. Your ancestors for 1,000 years kept this religion alive and this lantern alive. How did they do that? They took Imam Hussain outside. This is why if this year, today, in Lucknow, 30,000 Hindus come. Why do they come for? Do they believe in Imam Hussain? Well, they do now. Are they Shias? No, they don't need to be. Why? To believe in Imam Hussain, you don't need to be Shia. To believe in Imam Hussain, you just have to have a heart. And so today, dialogue is important. We must have dialogue. We must continue to talk to one another. In the words of Rabbi Sachs, when he was analyzing his own community, the chief rabbi, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain and the Commonwealth, one of the most famous rabbis in the world, I'd say, he said, look, when our community, pre-World War II, felt affected, we did 2 things. We became insular, and by becoming insular, what happened? We were divorced from the world, outside, and we became very reactive. The very same thing that you're finding today with the Muslim community. The more the media targets you, the more you become insular. The more you become insular, you're divorced from conversation. The more that you're divorced, when somebody touches you, you're ready to bite them. So what happens? We're reversing, actually. What is Imam Hussein's message? Open your arms out, even if you're being killed. If Hur deflected on the 10th of Muharram in the morning, it's because Hussein left the door open for him to deflect. And today we haven't even left the door open for our own Shias, let alone our outside neighbors. Open your doors. We need Sunnis to come. Just in December, I was in one of the shrines in Karthamain. Believe you me, 75% of every person in the shrine was a Sunni. I've never seen more Sunnis than Shias at a shrine like this. Right? Why? There's a movement taking place. And that is the spirit of Imam Hussain. That spirit is bringing people. If Ravi Shankar goes 3 times to Karbala, there's a reason why he's going. The most famous guru in India with 300 million followers is not a small thing. If our Christian brethren are going, if our Jewish brethren, the Board of Deputies is the oldest Jewish establishment, I would say, in the world today. Its vice president only 6 months ago was in Karbala. What makes him go? You tell me. Hussein transcends Islam. Hussein transcends Islam. So that's really what it is. People of faith or no faith. If you open up the concept of Imam Hussein, the first thing is pluralism, acceptance, not tolerance, by the way. I dislike the word tolerance. I don't tolerate you. I accept you for who you are. I accept you for your difference. Here today we have campaign upon campaign. We must tolerate one another. No, we must get past just tolerating one another. I think it's time to accept each other for its diversity. Why? God has made us diverse. So when a conversation begins, then what's the next stage? I think the next stage that comes through conversation is charity. And today, if we're going to change the narrative, look, you can see today that there is, whether we like it or not, some kind of an attack on religion. How do we reverse that? Remember one thing, charity is important. When we start talking to one another, it means that we can work with one another. Remember, dialogue leads to friendships, leads to trust, leads to hope. And in this world, we require hope. Without hope, if you look at the Islamic traditions, the first person to lose hope was Satan, in the mercy of God. We can't lose hope for a better world. We must continue to dialogue. We must continue to talk to one another. We must do something social and charitable. And so this is where our conversations with religious leaders come forward. What do we need to do? Charitable works. What is Hussein's mission? It was based upon charity. One charitable work that we're doing as a community is our blood drive. If you notice, there is a theology of blood as well, if I could say so. The blood sacrificed of Christ, Abraham and blood, Imam Hussain and blood. All 3 types. Sacrifice led to life. The first one, Abraham and his son. Jesus' sacrifice of blood led to salvation. Hussein's sacrifice of blood led to the revival of the consciousness of human beings. So what can we do? Look, I can only give you an example of Scotland. I come from Scotland. The largest blood drive in all of Scotland is in the name of Imam Hussain. The largest blood drive. The Queen sent 3 of her representatives in the last couple of years to go and give blood. The Church of Scotland have worked very closely with us. And in fact, the United Nations and the Church of Scotland, in fact, a former president of Princeton's Theological Seminary, say in Torrance, has actually been side by side with me for the last 4 years to promote Imam Hussain Day. The help that we've had from the presbyteries, in fact, has been quite phenomenal. So we've actually institutionalized in Scotland Imam Hussain Day, the first ever country in the world to officially identify the 12th of October as Imam Hussain Day. And many of your Princeton alumnus have been with us in this journey. And whenever I do go, I do see multiple members of the Church of Scotland coming in and out. So it's quite fascinating. It's a part of Scotland in your part of the world. But anyhow, the blood drive. Why is blood important? Let me tell you why. Because you're giving something of yourself to save the life of somebody else. And that's why. That's the philosophy behind it. If you want to understand how to de-radicalize someone even, get them to give blood. We've seen it in Glasgow. We brought people who were radical, we asked them to give blood, they de-radicalized. Why? Part of my life force to help somebody else's life. So when we convert this idea of theology of blood, it comes back to one thing. Let's give something from ourselves to help people. I remember last year when I was in Kentucky, 7,000 people came to give blood when we had our multi-faith blood drive within the space of 1 week. And I remember saying this, and I'll say this today as well. I was in a Catholic church in Kentucky on Muhammad Ali Boulevard, a Scottish Shia Imam talking about a multi-faith blood drive in the name of Imam Hussain. So there's great potential in your country. There's great diversity. I feel at home when I come here because the hearts of the people are open. You're good people. And it's a shame if we as a community don't dialogue. It's a shame that we don't go out and spread this message. Why? You're good people. Your people are good. You go outside, you'll see good people. It's our fault, therefore, that we haven't opened our doors. It's our fault that we don't go to the churches. It's our fault that we don't knock on the doors of the synagogues. It's our fault that we don't go to the temples. It's our fault. It's actually our fault. Why? Because we're not taking this message out in the way that your ancestors took this message out. The first community to support us after, if you remember what happened in New Zealand, was who? The Jewish community, the Christian community. Sikhs were protecting our mosques. Where are we today to help them? Why don't we give that message? Why are we so insular? Yes, I know you're scared, but I think it's a time for courage, as the speaker before me said. Courage is important, and we've got to use that courage to go out and to appeal to other people. So, third thing that develops into is selflessness. What does Imam Hussain teach? Selflessness. To help other people. To go out to be selfless in and of itself. You open up the Gita for those people who have read it. Krishna Arjuna, what's the first thing he's teaching? Karma Yoga. The idea of selflessness. You can get to enlightenment just by helping other people. Why? Because you're mirroring God. That's why it's important. Mirror God, help other people, and it becomes important for us to do that. So really that's the third philosophy that we get from Imam Hussain. And there he was, on the plains of Karbala, having lost his children, having lost his brother, companions, but as a man who's still selfless, still talking to people, still willing to forgive them. We're looking for an excuse to get angry with people, our arrogance as such. Here you find Imam Hussain the other way, willing to forgive people, even until the last moment. Forgiveness comes. And that's something, again, that humanity seems to have lost, the ability to forgive people, to remove that negativity out of our hearts, to embrace people becomes important. So look, moving swiftly on. From selflessness, what do we find? Two more things. To stand up with those people who are oppressed, regardless of color, regardless of creed, language, religion. Why are we so, if you look at what we do sometimes, we pick and choose our causes. No, actually what's important for us is to stand up against all types of oppression. Be it in Egypt with the Christian minorities, be it in places such as Pakistan, Kashmir, or otherwise Burma. It's important for us. If you truly do believe in the message of standing up against oppression, then stand up against oppression everywhere, even if it means oppression by your own people. And what does Imam Hussain teach us? He doesn't teach us the way of the sword. That's not the way that we stand up. We don't stand up by chucking stones at people, by blocking their roads, not even by standing outside embassies. It's not the way Imam Hussain teaches us. How does Imam Hussain teach us? Look at the message of Imam Hussain. What did he do? He wasn't there to fight. People look at him as a man who was there to fight, as a revolutionary in terms of how Europeans were revolutionaries, no? Imam Hussain doesn't do that. Imam Hussain says in Medina to his brother, let's go to Mecca. Why? We don't want to fight. Had he fought in Medina, he would have won. We're not here to fight. We're here to stand up, heart and tongue. Heart refuses to accept Yazid, and the tongue will say it. I'm not giving my allegiance to a tyrant. But we're not here to fight. So he moves to Mecca. From Mecca again he moves. Why? We're not here to fight. goes to Kufa, we're not here to fight. Shifts to Karbala, we're not here to fight. The message isn't one of fighting. The message is what? Heart and tongue. If you look at all of your Imams, none of them fought, only 2 of them did. One was Imam Ali when? Not for the first 25 years, but when he was head of a country, because he had to keep the peace of a country. Second, for 6 months, Imam Hussain. Why? Again, when he was the Caliph, keep the peace of the country. Otherwise, none of your Imam fought. Hussain was killed with his family. That tells you he wasn't there to fight a war. So what does that tell us? Stand up for the oppressed, but not with violence, with loving compassion, with your heart and with your tongue. You can do a lot just by talking. That's what's important. Tell people why you're doing this. Sometimes parading down a road doesn't help you. You know why? Because there's already a negative stereotype. Educate people first while you're making a stand, and then you may see people may join you in that stand. So when you do stand up for the oppressed, what do you find? Peace. And I think that's the first and final message of Imam Hussain. What did he say to Hur? Hur itself means what? Free. He says, you're free. Live in peace. You're all free. You have the freedom to make choices. God has made you free. You've got freedom to make choices. The option is yours now. Who do you want to stand with? Yazid or Hussain? To stand with Hussain means you've got to start resonating the qualities of Hussain, to start mirroring the image of God in its entirety. Only then can you say that you're Hussain. Yazid's a very, very shallow option out. You know why that is? Because it stands for all of those things which come easy to us. Jealousy, backbiting, hurting other people, ego, materialism. What is Hussain? Emancipation from all of those shackles. Hussain makes you free. You can fly like a bird then. Why? You have no enmity for anyone, and you embrace everyone. To conclude on 2 things. Remember, what do we need? Every human being needs love. What does Hussain teach us? Love and mercy. Today, who's alive then? Yazid thought he would kill Imam Hussain. The message would be quashed. It would be finished. What does Imam Hussain do? Imam Hussain knew Yazid was going to quash me, demolish me, destroy me. 30,000 people coming for 72 men, even when the tents were burnt, the women were enslaved. The purpose of that? Quash this message. What happened? Imam Hussain took somebody with him. That was a sister. This message, today if it's alive, if the message of Hussain is alive today, and if Islam is alive today, it's because of a woman. It's because of a sister. Islam is not complete today. Islam is not complete today until we don't work together. This isn't a patriarchal religion. It's a religion based upon equality. And so therefore, we need our matriarchs and we need our patriarchs. So to conclude on that, let's work together. Let's work with the diversity in this room. Let's reach out to our neighbors. Let's make a difference. Look, time is short. We don't have decades to live. Our life is very short. Do something that has an impact. Anyone can live, but live good. Live with compassion. Live with love. So that maybe one day when you're standing in front of Imam Hussain, you too can say, we took your message forward. Thank you very much.